Uh, Once again, thank you for showing up, Tech in 30 for our prop tech news source for FIOPS USA. I welcome you all here. As you know, I'm Corwin Nicholson. I'm the producer and moderator for Tech in 30 for FIOPS USA, and I'm also the Chief Technology Officer for Endeavor.ai, which is a fintech prop tech company, and we use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain technology for solutions in fintech and prop-tech. I'm joined here by Dr. Fabio Duarte. He's the presenter for today's session on autonomous vehicles and real estate. If you're all thinking like me, I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with real estate? But, you know, Fabio shed some light on that. Fabio is a presenter. He's going to be our presenter. He's a lecturer and principal research scientist at MIT Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and also with the MIT Sensible City Lab. Good morning, Fabio. Thank you for joining us. We welcome you here, and we will definitely enjoy your presentation. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our leadership, Ms. Eugenia Foxworth. Good afternoon, sorry, Eugenia. Welcome, and I'd like to, ask if there's anything that you would like to share with this distinguished group to get us kicked off here.
No, I just would like to welcome Fabio Duarte and thank him very much for accepting the FIOPS USA invitation. And I look forward to listening because this Tech in 30, the last time, was very interesting to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eugenia. Was someone going to say anything?
No, I'm ready to start.
All right. Well, before we get that, I just want to let the audience know that I think they're familiar with the Tech in 30 series. Like I mentioned before, this is FIOPS USA's platform to talk about burgeoning technologies or current technologies that are related to the real estate market. And this is to help us as real estate professionals to use this knowledge to enhance our business and to be subject matter experts in our own domains, but also be able to leverage the technology that's out there to help us to maintain and grow our business. This webinar we're having here is the autonomous vehicles real estate. And like I mentioned before, what does all those have in common? And one of those two rather have in common, but real estate is connected to so many things. It makes sense that there is a connection. As our agenda is going to be, Fabio is going to present. It's going to be about 30 minutes, give or take, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So I will stop sharing and hand it over to Dr. Fabio Duarte.
Thank you, Corwin. Thank you, Eugenia. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And for me, it's a real challenge because I'm coming from the Urban Studies Department. And more recently, I also joined the Center for Real Estate here at MIT. And this area of research, autonomous vehicles and real estate, is something that we started developing pretty recently. So some of the ideas that I will show to you here are still in development. And I would love to hear your opinion as well. But when we talk about autonomous vehicles, as many buzzwords that we hear all the time, will these autonomous vehicles actually have any impact in our lives, in our cities? And how can we measure that? There is one thing called zero principle. And zero principle is that when we have a new technology that has the potential to reduce to zero the cost of the previous technology, most probably this technology will become mainstream. I'll give you an example. So when we start to have the steam engines, once we had the steam engines, the cost that was related to have, let's say, a factory in the 19th century, 18th century, next to a water body decreased to zero. So we can have this steam engine anywhere. So this is a principle of this is the basic idea of the zero principle. And if we think of autonomous vehicles, in many cases, for instance, car accidents, as you might have read before, but we know that in the United States, 90% of all car accidents, they are caused by the driver behavior. So if autonomous cars don't cause any accident, all the costs related to car accidents will decrease to zero. If we have transportation, let's say freight, and part of the cost is related to drivers, if we remove the driver from the equation, then the cost of the driver goes to zero. So because of that, there is a growing belief in the industry that autonomous cars will actually be a transformative industry. And this timeline, it shows how fast it's happening. So first, when DARPA decided to do a competition about, okay, let's see if we can have autonomous cars driving in a desert. So there's basically no people walking around, no other cars, no buildings, anything, only artificial obstacles. And we had a 142-mile obstacle course. Only one team was able to drive autonomously 7 miles, so 5% of the course. This is 2004. Okay, 15 years later, in 2018, Waymo, the Google company, had already driven more than 10 million miles in urban streets. So this shows how fast the industry is growing. And as we all know, we have billions and billions of dollars invested in cars. And just to also give an idea, it's not only car companies, but also tech companies like Google, but venture capitalists are investing a lot. But what does it mean for cities? And then we go to real estate. Then planners, since I'm coming from the planning side, we face a conundrum where we have new technologies coming. The first one is this picture here. So what we see in this picture, basically, is a pretty busy street with lots of people and carts and horses everywhere. And in 1899, we had the first international conference on urban planning in the United States, and it was supposed to last 10 days. They cut it short after the second day because they said, okay, we don't have solution for the most critical problem that we have in our cities at the time, which was traffic, horse traffic. The problem was not that much about the traffic itself, but they calculated that if in 20 years, if they did not collect any excrement, any poo of horses, they will reach the 4th floor of Chicago. Okay, so they say, okay, after 2 days, go home, we don't have solution. Less than 20 years later, the number of cars had already surpassed the number of horses. And what was the solution? Cars. The planners could not see such a powerful technology coming and transforming the city. So this is when planners don't know exactly how to deal with a cutting edge technology. But we have also the opposite, no, let's say the other face. The other face is this picture here. So you might have seen this picture or something similar to this when you read about autonomous cars, etc. And what we see here is this happy family playing dominoes while traveling in a highway, right? However, what's interesting here is that although we use this picture to show, oh, autonomous cars have been around for decades, this is not an autonomous car. What we have here is an electric superhighway. So the idea is that it's a regular car that enters the highway, and then what we have here is basically a rail. a magnetic rail that is guiding the car. So imagine that if on the first case with the horses, planners did not act and the technology transformed everything. Imagine that in this case, the government, they said, no, this electric rail will be the future. Let's invest billions and billions of dollars changing all the infrastructure in the United States, because we're going to have this type of technology. All this money would be gone to trash, because this is technology that did not work out. So this is the conundrum: which technologies will actually be transformative or not? And this is the zero principle comes again, right? But let's see, where is autonomous vehicles now, and what autonomous vehicles can bring to cities and to real estate. And I would like to show you first this example, because although I'm pretty into the urban studies part, I'm also involved in a project in Amsterdam called Rowboat. We are entering the 6th year, and in Amsterdam, we are building autonomous boats. In this case, you can see is a render, but let me see if I can share. Can you still see my screen,
So I've got my essay written, and I've been working on it for...
Okay, let me just, the guy stopped talking. Okay, cool.
So here's my...
Now, let's see this video.
This is Lucy. Lucy is a rowboat, a fully autonomous, zero-emission boat that operates on urban waterways, and she can change the way cities work. As congestion and emissions continue to rise, while cities continue to grow, the existing infrastructure of many cities struggles to keep up. Rowboats offer a solution by moving road traffic to the water. By bringing passengers from A to B, or as an on-demand boat, taking you anywhere you want. And they can also help the city as a multi-purpose workboat. Take Crystal. She is equipped to collect household waste to free the streets from heavy garbage trucks. Rowboats are fully autonomous, so they navigate without a skipper and can operate 24/7. In order to sail by themselves, rowboats need to perceive their environment and recognize objects such as bridge pillars, floating objects, and of course, other vessels. The primary source of information comes from a LiDAR sensor, but rowboats are also equipped with cameras, GPS, and a digital compass. Rowboat's onboard computer combines and processes all of the data and runs the rowboat software so it can successfully complete its mission plan. After 5 years of development, testing, and experimentation, we have now successfully enabled autonomy on the full-scale prototypes. Rowboat is ready for the next step. Join us and let's unlock the potential of urban waterways together.
So this project was just to show you that actually autonomous vehicles, we are working with them in different domains, including aquatic bodies. And the city of Amsterdam knows that if they implement autonomous boats in their canals, probably we're gonna solve part of some problems that they face, for instance, traffic in the historic center. And in some cases, they have been even, although the market there is super high, the real estate market is very hot, but they know that this will bring a new life to parts of the city that currently are clogged with traffic. But also, in another project in Singapore, we decided to do the following. So what if, instead of using regular cars driven by one person only, because as you know, most of the cars are single occupancy, what if we could have not only shared mobility, but also autonomous cars? And the difference is that as with shared mobility, I don't need my car, I take an Uber and it goes everywhere, right? But the autonomy comes when I need to park. I don't necessarily need to park in the CBD. I can just bring somebody to the city center and then park elsewhere, where either parking costs are much cheaper or we have less traffic. And what we did with the real data from Singapore. This is not simulation. We took the real data that Singapore had, and we calculated that if we could have autonomous cars driving in the same fleet, but then the same trips, but not the same fleet, the same trips, using autonomous vehicles, we could reduce the demand for parking in Singapore that currently occupies 2% of the territory to 0.6% of the territory. So imagine how much land you would release for new types of developments in a city where you can decrease the parking demand. So in this case, we start approaching to, okay, we can quantify how much land we will release if we have autonomous cars. But also there is another aspect that we are exploring right now. So this is a very new line of research that we are developing, which is the following. So here is Kiva. Kiva is the Amazon robot that they basically have transformed warehouses. So you can simply put the packs there. Now we have other type of robot that grabs the stuff that are in the high shelves and bring to the Kiva, and they move around. Here we have light simply because we have a person walking, but obviously they work in completely dark. So we don't have several costs related to warehouse, the automation of warehouses using autonomous vehicles, including autonomous vehicles, is changing completely. But also we have some companies, some of you might have seen these, some pictures similar to that, is that we can also transform the logistics outside the warehouse. So in the right-hand side, what if I have this delivery car that comes and then you go there, you type your code, then you get our package, or you have in more residential areas, rather than coming a truck, we have these small minions, let's say, bringing your goods around. So companies are testing different forms. This might, perhaps none of these technologies will be commercially viable in the future, but it shows that pretty big companies are investing and testing new possibilities. And one of them that we are exploring with a logistics company that I cannot tell the name now, but it's one of the biggest players in the world in logistics, is the following. So if I don't have a driver, because autonomous cars obviously don't have a driver, if I don't have a driver, I can first have rather than having a central warehouse in the outskirts of the city and bring the products, etc., I can start having smaller warehouses scattered across the city, and then the autonomous vehicles, smaller ones, they will be connecting these warehouses to the final consumer. But also, if then we can link this with the previous one, parking. Oh, but what if we don't need as much parking garages anymore because we have autonomous cars? What can we do with these parking garages? As you know, we cannot transform a parking garage in a residential building for structural reasons. Even the height of the ceiling is we cannot do that. But then, can we use part of the parking garages as distributed warehouses, all operated with autonomous vehicles? So this is something that we have done one dissertation already with a company. This one I can disclose because it's public, Heinz, assessing how autonomous vehicles could disrupt the garage market. And now we are working with the logistic company to try to identify the potential and measure the impact that AV can bring to warehouses. And finally, because I would like to hear from you, there is one thing that it's totally unknown, but we're trying to see different scenarios. And in this case, it's total scenarios because we don't have the vehicles, different from what we have with Kiva, that we have the robots in the warehouse, we have the small bots trying to move around neighborhoods. We have Rowboat, the autonomous boat. We have data about parking and traffic to measure the impact of AV on parking. Here, the infilling and sprawling is the following. On the one hand, if a driver does not have the burden of driving from a city to downtown, would this person live even farther away from the city center? Because if I don't have the burden of driving, I can simply lay down and read a book or work while my autonomous car is driving me to the city. So there is a risk of increasing sprawling. On the other hand, some researchers think, yes, but if we are decreasing traffic in cities, because with autonomous cars, you're not clogging the streets anymore, you don't need to necessarily have on-street parking. So if you are making the city center also safer, because as I mentioned, more than 9% of the accidents are caused by drivers, wouldn't people reconsider living downtown rather than sprawling? So this is a very uncertain area. I haven't seen any robust research because it's much more difficult to find any quantitative element to measure. But still, this is an area that when I talk to some real estate companies, this is an area that might have a huge impact, in a long-term impact, but it might have a huge impact, not only for the real estate industry itself, but most importantly, I think for cities and urban quality of life. I'd like to conclude here, and I'm open for questions, and thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Fabio. That was it was very, very interesting. I will say that I have several questions, but I'll just have one for right now. So when you looked at the study in I forgot, I think it's at Singapore, where you did the analysis of using autonomous vehicles, autonomous cars, and it would reduce people having to, I guess, have garages, park on the streets, and you showed that percentage of how the land is freed up. I can remember if you said or not, did you discuss that with developers and commercial developers, and if so, what kind of feedback did you get? Was it positive, negative? I mean, I would imagine it'd be positive because you're freeing up land, but I don't know that. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so we haven't discussed the case of Singapore in Singapore, but we have done similar thing in New York. And then in New York, our first stakeholders to approach was the city of New York and the Department of Transportation, and say, look, this is how, so we calculated in the case of New York, just to give you an idea, that we could reduce traffic in Manhattan, keeping the same trips, not changing any trip. We could reduce the number of vehicles on the streets of Manhattan immediately to 40%. So this is how much traffic we could release of Manhattan. There is a caveat though, similar to what happens in other areas of transportation. When you have a busy road, if you create a second road or a second lane to alleviate traffic, you might actually be attracting even more passengers, right? More cars. So we have this risk. If you're reducing traffic in Manhattan, people living in the outskirts might think, oh, now it's not as busy anymore. Let's take the car and go to Manhattan. We always have this risk. But the first impression when showing the results to the Department of Transportation and city officials, it was a huge surprise. Without changing any trip, so without asking you to take an Uber or to share a trip, by introducing autonomous vehicles, which can drop you and go anywhere, you will start reducing the number of cars in the street, in the city.
You know, that's interesting, Fabio. I'm sorry, I'm going to have one more follow on to that. So going back to, reducing the traffic, but also my mind thinking about freeing up what I call freeing up land. I mean, and New York would be a perfect case. I mean, Eugenia can speak more on that. But it's just like, what is there a possibility that, and it seems like from what you've shown that may have some sort of correlation where you could quote unquote free up land, and that would be like in places like New York, DC, San Francisco, Bay Area. Those are like their land is not going to grow, so it's like so
exactly.
if you could free up land, that would be I would think a great thing for developers. I mean, just me commenting, making that statement. So any feedback would be good from anyone.
For instance,
hey, this is Shirley.
Go ahead, please, Shirley.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Excuse the noise, I'm driving, but this is a very interesting conversation. Just a comment on I'll call them the boats going up the waterways. I think one thing that has to be addressed is up here, there has been proposals for a while to get that done on the Potomac River. And two impediments to that are, number one, the speed that's allowed, and number two, the noise ordinance. So that's just a comment on that. But for the the capitalist in me, for the parking lots, okay, parking lot investors, commercial real estate investors suffered a lot with COVID, with people not coming to park. So what I'm hearing is a play could be analogous to land banking. If you can get those parking lots at a good rate and sitting on it and waiting for the last mile industrial repurpose of those parking lots, has there been any conversations around that?
No, but this is a very good question, actually. It's a very good point to make, because as I mentioned in the beginning, thank you for the commentary, Shirley. Now we are since we show these two projects, the parking in Singapore, and then we start the logistics, we start getting more attention here from the Center for Real Estate, and we are starting now some research that includes talking to the real estate industry and stakeholders, also to feel their take on the issue. And for the river, I think you make a good point, because in Amsterdam, we have an advantage that all boats in Amsterdam, they will need to be electric by 2025. And in part is because, as you said, about the noise, even though they have already restrictions about using boats during the evening, etc. But having the boats electric is one of the things that the city have implemented to face the noise issue. And Chile, in the case of Washington, I don't know if the main concern is with high-speed boats or the opposite, because in Amsterdam, the issue was actually the opposite. They have restricted all traffic in Amsterdam canals to 6 kilometers per hour. It means that even with traffic, is already faster to go basically anywhere in Amsterdam using bikes. We have a very interesting research comparing if we go from anywhere to anywhere within the city of Amsterdam, it's faster if you take your bike. But the low speed in the canals, it's an impediment to have boats for transporting people if you want to compete with cars.
That was the finding here also.
Yes.
It's too slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just something to work on. I mean, it's not a dead end. It's just something to work on.
Yeah.
I think Eugenia, you had a question?
Yeah.
Yes. Fabio, you mentioned New York. We have a major problem because one of our government officials a couple of years ago decided that he would limit the developers on putting in parking garages. And they had up until a certain amount of time during that particular period, forgetting that it takes 4 to 5 years once you decide you're going to do a building. Were you speaking recently to anyone or before as to whether or not they would be able to use what you're doing now? Because I know I have a horrible time parking. I mean, I go into garages, but garages are packed. The bike lanes have taken over outside parking. And it's really a very bad situation here in the city, plus the addition of money that you have to pay when you take a taxi if you go below 60th Street. So if you could help.
Yeah. No, we haven't spoke recently with any city official in New York. That would be because for us, one of the surprises when we did this project actually in New York, we use taxi data as a proxy of Uber data, for instance, right? It's a kind of we don't know where they're coming from, where they're going. And what for us was interesting is that obviously it caught Uber attention for the project, but then Uber started sponsoring the lab. But rather than sponsoring the lab to work on traffic optimization, this type of thing that Uber does, we started using some sensors that are already present in any Uber car, which is your cell phone, to measure infrastructure health. So if we have several cars driving around with a cell phone, we have an accelerometer inside a cell phone, basically that guides when you turn your screen around. But if you have many data points, the information that you have about, let's say, bridge health is as good as if you had one monitor, a standard monitor there. So we shift the conversation. But going back to your point, we haven't, but we know, based on all the simulations, that you are correct. The impact of AV on parking would be dramatic. And what we know, perhaps the solution will come as it happens with the horse and the car. Perhaps the solution will not be around policy or change regulation, but now this new technology changed everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions out there that before I ask another one?
So this is Shirley. I have another
Shirley.
question about, so you're looking to put the parking, if you will, for the autonomous vehicles outside of the city. Did you guys look at what they're doing with that in the public storage space? Because public storage, what some companies are doing now is they pick up the storage, I'll call them items for people in the cities, and they build a public storage facilities outside, far away, where the land is cheaper.
Yeah.
And they'll bring it to you, they'll pick it up and deliver it to you. So are you using that as a proof of concept, a model or something like that?
Yeah. Yes, and more than that, we are working with these logistics companies, and what they are also doing, they are renting small shops and some strip malls where we have some closed stores, and they have these micro warehouses distributed across the city. So rather than having this great warehouse outside, they distribute the product in key points in the city. And when you require something, they just go to these micro warehouses. Is one possibility that we see very promising. But perhaps I'm talking more from the urban planning perspective. Is this repurposing of existing infrastructure that we have in cities, that if they go unused, what can we do? instead of leaving them empty. Right? Okay, Corinne, before I go to my trip, I still need to have a short call here. If I don't mind, I'm open for answering any questions. If you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Fabio, for this exciting topic. I mean, we could just go on and on. I mean, I got like 8 more questions here, but we'll talk offline. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending. Eugenia, thank you so much. I appreciate your leadership here, and yeah, so hopefully we have we will have some more Tech in 30s to come, and hopefully they'll be as good and exciting as Fabio has presented here. And we may actually invite Fabio back, depending on whatever the latest research and analysis he's done. So hopefully you're open to that as well, Fabio.
Thank you all for coming. Bye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Corwin. It was
All
very
right.
good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.